family disowned me for 7 years, and later they wanted me back. This is my second Reddit family story, but this time, it's not about me, it's about my husband. For years, he never wanted to talk about this. He buried it, convinced that keeping it locked away was the best way to move forward. But after everything that happened with my own family, and after months of encouragement from me and his therapist, he realized something: keeping it inside wasn't helping. So, here it is, the story he never wanted to tell. This is a Reddit story with an update. My husband was disowned by his family, and 7 years later, they wanted him back. A few months ago, he finally shared a small part of his past online under the name Mark. That post reopened old wounds. For months, I watched him struggle, torn between wanting to forget and knowing that sharing it could help someone else going through the same thing. Because no matter how rare his story may seem, I know there are people out there who need to hear this: you are not alone. It gets better. So now, he's finally ready to tell it all. 15 years ago, my husband was 20 years old, finishing his final year of college. He had everything lined up for a bright future. He was on the baseball team, had a high GPA, and was preparing to apply for business school or law school. His family was wealthy, educated, and successful. His parents were respected and admired. Life was good. And then, everything fell apart. It started like any other day. He had just finished baseball practice when he checked his phone. It was blowing up. Hundreds of missed calls. Dozens of texts. Some were urgent: pick up now. Others were terrifying: you monster. At first, he thought it was some kind of sick joke. Confused and unsettled, he stepped outside to call his mom, trying to figure out what was going on. The second she picked up, she was already screaming. Before he could even process what she was saying, his uncle appeared out of nowhere and punched him in the face. He hit the ground hard, his nose gushing blood. His dad was right behind his uncle, grabbing him and shouting for him to stop. Then, he turned to my husband, eyes filled with pure hatred, and snarled, "Get up. Get in the car. Now." He had no idea what was happening, but he obeyed. That drive home? Hell. His nose was broken, his eye was swelling shut, and his own father wouldn't even look at him. And he still had no clue what he had done. When they pulled into the driveway, he saw them, his entire family, waiting for him. His mother was hysterical. Why? Why would you do this? His uncle was raging. Call the cops. And then, he heard a small voice. His 12-year-old cousin, Amy, stood in the middle of the room and said, "He assaulted me. At the 4th of July party. When we were alone in the house." Time froze. He felt like he had been punched in the gut all over again. What? No. I didn't. But no one cared. No one even listened. His father didn't hesitate, he drove his fist straight into his stomach. The pain was immediate, blinding, suffocating. Get out. He doubled over, struggling to breathe. And then he saw them, garbage bags full of his clothes, already packed by the door. They had already decided he was guilty. They had already thrown him away. So, he picked up the bags. And he left. He doesn't remember much after that. He thinks he slept in his car. One moment, he was a college student with a future. The next? Homeless. Alone. The police never came. Because there was no evidence. Because it never happened. A week later, Amy admitted she had lied. But by then, it didn't matter. His family had already erased him. They never reached out. Never apologized. For 7 years, he was dead to them. And then, out of nowhere, they wanted him back. He was sitting in our apartment, minding his own business, when his phone lit up with a message from his mom. "Hey, sweetheart. It's been a long time. Let's talk." He just stared at the screen, feeling nothing. 7 years of silence. 7 years of pain, rebuilding, surviving. And suddenly, they wanted to pretend it never happened. He never answered. Because for the first time in his life, he realized, he wasn't the one who lost a family that day. They lost him. I watched my husband go through so much pain because of these people. And I made sure he knew that he never had to let them back in. He has a new family. Now, one that actually loves him. And I swear on everything, they are never taking another second of his happiness away from him. For years, my husband never talked about this. He kept it locked away, convinced that pretending it never happened was the only way to survive. But after everything that happened with my own family, after watching me go through my own battles and take my own revenge, he finally admitted that keeping it inside wasn't helping him anymore. So now, I'm telling his story. This is how his family threw him away. And how, after 7 years, they had the audacity to ask for him back. They didn't just disown him. They threw him away like garbage. The night they accused him of something he never did, after his own father punched him and kicked him out, my husband wasn't even given a chance to fight back. He barely had time to breathe, let alone understand what was happening. Still, he managed to get up. He stumbled back to the front door, knocked, still desperate for answers, still hoping this was all a mistake. His father swung the door open so hard it nearly flew off its hinges. And then, he shoved him down the steps. "I told you to get out," his father screamed. My husband hit the ground hard, his body aching, his face still bleeding from the first attack. Tears blurred his vision. His chest felt like it was caving in. He had just lost everything in the span of an hour. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just picked himself up, walked to his van, and drove away. That van? It had been given to him to transport baseball gear and teammates. Now, it was his only home. He called a few teammates, barely managing to explain what had happened, and crashed on a couch for the night. For a week, he tried calling his family, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd come to their senses. No one answered. And then, finally, his dad sent a text. "Leave us alone. I didn't raise a monster. Rot in hell." He read it once. Then again. And then, something inside him just shut down. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. It was just numbness. A few weeks later, his university called. Tuition was due. His parents had been helping pay for college. He tried calling them one last time. Blocked. He checked his savings. Not even close to enough to cover the rest of the year. He went to apply for a loan, hoping he could figure something out. Rejected. No cosigner. No family support. No way out. He had two choices, drop out or survive on his own. So he quit the baseball team. He took on a full-time overnight job, working himself to exhaustion just to pay the bare minimum. And he lived in his van. Through the freezing winters and blistering summers, he survived, barely. He made it to graduation. But no one came. No one called. No one cared. That night, sitting in his van, something inside him broke. He bought multiple bottles of whiskey and went to the darkest place he had ever been. For 2 years, my husband lived like that, bouncing from job to job, sleeping in his van, barely scraping by. His mental health was destroyed. Whiskey was his only friend. Drugs were his only comfort. He trusted no one. He avoided everyone. He ran if he even saw a child, terrified that someone would look at him and see the monster his family believed he was. Summers were miserable. Winters were unforgiving. He should have frozen to death. He should have died from dehydration. He should have been mugged in his sleep. But somehow, he kept going. Until he couldn't anymore. Until his van finally died. The only thing that had been keeping him safe, its heat in the winter, its AC in the summer, was gone. That was it. That was the breaking point. He couldn't do it anymore. So he climbed to the roof of an apartment complex. Walked to the edge. Looked down. And was ready to jump. My husband stood there, staring at his phone, just praying that someone, anyone, from his family would call. A text. A missed call. Something. But there was nothing. The wind howled around him as he closed his eyes. He was ready. Ready to end it all. Ready to be pain-free. Then, a voice behind him. "Stop." He opened his eyes. Turned around. A woman was running toward him, pleading, her voice desperate. "Please, just climb down. Don't do this." His mind was racing, a million thoughts crashing into each other at once. Jump. Climb down. End it. Listen to her. He just stared at her, his body frozen, his brain screaming at him to just let go. And then, she extended her hand. She begged him to take it. And it was like something inside him shifted. Like some part of him, the part that still wanted to live, no matter how broken he felt, took control. He reached out and climbed down. The second his feet hit the ground, his body collapsed. Paramedics were called. They took him to the hospital. He spent 2 days there before they released him. And when he stepped outside, she was there, waiting for him. The woman who saved his life. She ran up to him, eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked. His mind froze. And all he could say was, "No." She hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Do you have any family to pick you up?" He shook his head. "No." "Do you have a place to stay?" "No." He looked down, shoulders slumped, and started walking away. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Don't know." "Are you hungry?" "No." "Do you know any other words besides that one?" "Don't know." She sighed. "Well, you can't just sleep on the streets tonight. Come over to my place, I'll cook you dinner." He hesitated. "Why?" She shrugged. "Because you look like you. Need a friend." Her apartment was beautiful. Books were everywhere. Every room had historical paintings, it felt like a museum. She finally introduced herself. "I'm Rachel. I'm 22. She worked at her dad's company." They talked for what felt like days. But in reality, it was only 3 hours. He avoided talking about his past. She didn't push. And for the first time in years, he felt safe. He ended up staying with her for 3 weeks. During that time, she helped him get a job at her father's company, nothing big, just a front desk position. He quit drinking. Went cold turkey on the drugs. Rachel drove him to work every day. She made him breakfast and dinner. They spent almost every moment together in those 3 weeks. And then, he told her he was looking for his own place. "You've done enough for me," he said. Rachel just looked at him. "Stay." He frowned. "Why?" And suddenly, all the pain, all the anger, all the years of being discarded like garbage, they crashed into him at once. "Why are you nice to me?" he yelled, his voice breaking. Rachel didn't flinch. She took his hand and pulled him to sit down. She tried to hug him, but he pulled away, muttering, "I don't deserve it." She didn't argue. She just held onto his hand and whispered, "Stay. At least until you see a therapist." "No." His mind fractured again. He didn't even realize he was pacing in circles, muttering to himself, completely lost. Then, suddenly, he stopped. And for some reason, he finally said, "Yes." For 4 weeks, he saw a therapist. Rachel paid for every session. At first, he barely spoke. But over time, he started to open up. Little by little. Piece by piece. And then, Rachel invited him to her parents' house for her dad's birthday. It was a huge party, filled with her family. And as he walked through the house, surrounded by warmth and laughter, the memories of that night, the night his own family threw him away, came rushing back. He sat alone for most of the night, gripping a glass of water like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. He barely spoke. He barely moved. Every chance he got, he found an excuse to hide in the bathroom. He didn't belong here. This wasn't his world. And then, it got worse. Rachel's family, kind, welcoming, loving people who meant no harm, started asking questions. Questions about his family. Questions about his past. Over. And over. And over again. Until something inside him snapped. His hands shook as he looked around the room, his breathing coming in short, ragged gasps. And then, he broke. "They disowned me." The room fell silent. "They threw me away because my cousin said I did something I didn't do." His voice cracked, raw with years of pain and anger. "No one will ever believe me. I'll walk this world alone. My own father beat me. My own family cast me aside, left me to die in the cold." His voice dropped to a whisper, barely holding itself together. "Please. Let me leave. I don't deserve to be here. Forget I ever came." Before anyone could stop him, he ran to the door. His fingers fumbled with the handle, his heart racing. But before he could escape, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Firm. Steady. He froze. His breath hitched. His body went stiff as every muscle remembered the pain of his father's fist. He squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the punch. Waiting for the impact. Tears streamed down his face as he braced for it. But it never came. Slowly, he opened his eyes. Rachel's father stood there. Not angry. Not disgusted. Just sad. My husband let out a whimper, his voice shaking. Go ahead. Hit me. The man didn't move. Instead, he softly sighed and said, Son. I look into people's eyes for a living. His voice was calm. Gentle. I can tell when someone is lying to me. I can see when someone is being honest. I see the truth in your eyes. I see the pain. Please, let us help you. Please, stay. A sound escaped my husband's throat, a noise he never wanted to make again. A broken, guttural sob. And then, he collapsed into the man's arms. Rachel's family didn't hesitate. They gathered around him, wrapping him in the kind of love and warmth he had never known. For the first time in his life, he felt wanted. The next few years flew by. Rachel became more than just the woman who saved him. She became the reason he learned to stand on his own 2 feet. She didn't just give him a place to stay, she gave him back his life. She helped him believe in himself again. She helped him push. Through therapy, through his education, through his healing. She never treated him like a charity case. Never pitted him. She challenged him. Pushed him. Made him stronger. And one day, he no longer needed Rachel to hold him up, because he was standing tall, all on his own. With her help, he got into business school. Graduated. Landed a great job at Rachel's father's company. Bought his first ever car. His first house. And through it all, he never touched a drop of alcohol again. 7 years sober. Still counting. Then, he met me. By the time I came into his life, he had already rebuilt himself. But something inside him never forgot what it felt like to be discarded. To be thrown away like nothing. So when he saw my family treating me the same way his family treated him, when he saw how they tried to control me, humiliate me, break me down, something inside him snapped. He had been there before. And he wasn't going to let it happen to me. So he fought for me. Protected me. Stood by my side when no one else did. And now? Now he's not just my husband. He's my rock. My safe place. My home. Rachel gave him a second chance at life. And now, he's giving me one too. The call came out of nowhere. Life had finally started feeling free, like my husband was no longer shackled by the past, no longer weighed down by the ghosts of the people who threw him away. He had rebuilt himself from nothing. And through it all, Rachel had been his lifeline. She wasn't just the woman who saved him, she was the reason he got back up again. She gave him shelter when he had none. She pushed him to stand on his own 2 feet. Her family supported him, helped him through school, therapy, and the painful process of piecing himself back together. Even now, they were still helping, investing in the business he had just opened, treating him like one of their own. He owed them everything. And now, I was the one standing beside him. Rachel had given him a second chance at life. And now, he was giving me one, too. So when the phone rang, when he picked up, expecting it to be work, hello? A pause. Then, oh my God. Op? His stomach dropped. His breath hitched. Who is this? A shaky exhale. It's Mom. His entire body locked up. And then, without thinking, K off. He hung up. The phone nearly flew across the room as he gripped it too tight, his mind spinning. A call. From them. After 7 years of silence, exile, abandonment, now they wanted to talk. The phone rang again. He let it go to voicemail. His hands were shaking as he grabbed his office desk for balance. Without hesitating, he called me. I dropped everything and drove to his office. I found him sitting there, pale as a ghost, his hands balled into fists, his breathing uneven. I sat with him, held his hands, whispered words of comfort, and reminded him that he wasn't alone anymore. That night, when he turned his phone back on, The messages flooded in. Just like last time. Except this time, they weren't calling him a monster. They weren't screaming at him to rot in hell. They were begging. Call us. Please. I'm sorry. Forgive me. But then, there was one message that made him stop cold. It was from his mother. He deleted it after reading it, but the words were burned into his memory. Please, please answer the phone. We need to talk. We have always loved you. We have always prayed for you. Amy finally told the truth. She confessed. She admitted it was a lie. She was only a kid, we just wanted to protect her. We thought we were doing the right thing. Please, come back. Let us fix this. For 2 weeks, he struggled. He went to therapy every day. And I sat with him through it all. We practiced every possible conversation so he could stay calm. We planned an exit strategy in case things went south. I reminded him that no matter what happened, he had a family now, me. And after 2 weeks, he made his decision. He needed closure. He sent one text. A time. A place. And a rule: only his parents could come. No extended family. And then, the day arrived. They met at a coffee shop. His parents saw him before he saw them. They ran toward him, arms outstretched, desperate to hold him. But before they could reach him, I stepped between them. No hugs, I said firmly. Sit down. His mother's face crumpled, but they obeyed. I ordered him a Coke with ice, something to chew on to. Keep himself grounded. And then, it was time. He took a deep breath. And he began. His parents spilled everything. A few weeks ago, Amy had called a family meeting. And she finally told the truth. She had been young and stupid. She had just wanted attention. The family showered her with love, gifts, vacations. She got to go to Disney World, Europe, big parties. A new car. Money. She had lived like royalty while he lived in hell. And now, after years of hearing news stories about false accusations, after seeing what happened to people who were wrongfully accused, she got scared. And for the first time in 7 years, she thought of him. His father apologized. Said he had just been so angry, so emotional. He didn't know what to do, so he took all that rage out on his own son. And when he tried to come back home, they shoved him away again. He listened. He let them talk. And then, he dropped the bombshell. Do you even remember where I was on the 4th of July? His parents froze. His mother blinked. His father looked at him like a deer in headlights. Of course you were there, his dad said. You were at the party. No, my husband said. Then, he pulled out his phone. Pulled up a picture from that day. It was him. At a baseball tournament. In another state. Their faces drained of color. His mom looked like she was going to throw up. His dad stammered, No, that's not right, you were there, right? He shoved the phone across the table. Look at the date. Silence. Then, he asked the next question. Why was my tuition canceled? My meal plan? My financial aid? His mother frowned. We never canceled that. We kept it for you. His father? Silent. Completely still. Then, finally, he spoke. I wanted to support my brother. And just like that, everything clicked. The money meant for his education, food, survival. His father gave it to his brother instead. And that was the moment he was done. You lost your son 7 years ago. He is gone. And with that, we walked away. He didn't turn back. Not once. Because for the first time in his life, he was free. Free from their guilt. Free from their excuses. Free from the weight of a past he never deserved. They lost their son 7 years ago, and now, they finally had to live with it. Because he wasn't the lost one anymore. They were. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to his story. Sometimes, family isn't about blood, it's about who truly stands by you. And for those still fighting their own battles, remember this, you are not alone. You deserve love, respect, and a life free from those who tried to break you. And most importantly, you get to decide who deserves a place in your future. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.